Welcome everyone to Women of the Military podcast. I'm really excited to have Aubrey here. She was actually on the podcast with Veterans for Financial Freedom and for episode 270, and we talked a lot about the work they're doing, and so she got to share about her experience. So I'll link to that so you can go back and listen if you haven't had a chance to hear about all the amazing things they're doing. But I'm excited to have her back to hear her military story. So welcome so much. I can't talk. Welcome to the show. I'm just so excited.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
So we always start with, why did you decide to join the military?
So back in 2008, 2009, I was in Illinois on my family farm. And the only way that I could get out of state, get away from Illinois, was to pay for my own college because I wanted to go to college. And I learned about ROTC. My brother went to Naval Academy, and I wasn't really interested in that. So I learned about ROTC, and then I got the scholarship, and then I just had to figure out where I wanted to go to college. So that was initially just was like, okay, I'm going to go to college. I have to get it paid for because my family can't afford it. And that's how it started.
And then you were able to get a scholarship right out of high school. So you did the process of, or how did that all work?
Yeah, I think it was my senior or junior year. Maybe it was my junior year of high school. And I got the ROTC scholarship, and then I just had to find a university. And then started applying for universities. So I went to the University of Maryland, and at that time it was a consortium school, meaning like we had to commute to George Washington every day. Now it has its own program, but it was like an hour commute there, an hour commute back, which is pretty gnarly, but it was actually really fun. So yeah.
So they had a bunch of different ROTC units that all met at one school just because the units were small. Is that what you're saying? Or I'm a little.
Yeah. Oh, did you go to the Naval Academy or the Air Force?
Well, I did ROTC too, but we only had, we had cross campus, but that was because we have a community college and a four-year university. So it was like a 20-minute drive, not
Yeah.
an hour. That's a little intense.
Yeah. Well, it just depended on traffic because honestly, it wasn't that far away, but it's DC. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was like Howard, Catholic, Georgetown, and University of Maryland all met at George Washington. So it was like really fun doing that for 4 years. It was just like, you wake up at 4 a.m. in college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember having like an 8 o'clock class right after PT. And so we'd have to like rush to get there. And, and it would be even harder if you had a commute to add to it. You're like, no 8 a.m. classes.
Yeah. I will say the good thing is though that you were like far away from the unit. So once you were back at University of Maryland, you're just like a normal college kid. So that was actually really nice. So yeah.
Yeah.
But then I did a bunch of like the midshipman cruises, and then found out that aviation was like the coolest thing to do. So sign up for that, but you don't really realize, you realize they tell you, but until you're like really into your career, it's like a 10-year commitment to be an aviator. So at least a pilot, and then a couple 2 years less to be a navigator. But yeah, so I signed up for like the longest commitment, but ended up working out.
So you did some sea tours like while you're a cadet, and then you were like, oh, aviation, this sounds really cool, and so you followed that path. And so that's really cool. Normally you interview pilots or in the Air Force, and I know that there's pilots in the Navy and the Army, and the Marine Corps, but we don't always get a chance to talk to them. So not that I know what career field in aviation you picked. There's a lot of options, but so what did you pick to do, and what was your training like?
Yeah, so 2013, I graduated from college and then like immediately went down to Pensacola, Florida. And the flight school, it took me about 2.5 years, and I just stayed in the Pensacola area, and I did helicopter because the helicopter training's over there too. It's just like in Milton, it's like 45 minutes outside, and did the helicopter training, and then got sent off to San Diego to do the MH60 Romeo. There's also the MH60 Sierra. So I did the Romeo out of San Diego. There's a bunch of different options. Like you can go to Japan, Hawaii. Now there's Rhoda, and then there's Jacksonville. But San Diego, I was like, I've never been to San Diego, and I was like very dead set on it because I just knew how awesome it was. So did that, and it's crazy. So I think I got to San Diego in August 2015 ish, and I haven't left since. So my whole career has been in San Diego, which is so rare, so rare. So I've been very lucky for that.
Yeah, but that's really cool that you got to go where you wanted to go, and then you've gotten to stay in the area and, like, build some roots and then, transition out and stay in the same place. That makes it a little bit easier than having to start all over again. So, you said you picked helicopters. Do you in the Air Force, they kinda go through, like, a basic flight school, and then they pick their aircraft? I'm kinda just making that up. No, I think that's how they do it. I'm, like, 99% sure. But did you know that you were gonna do helicopters from the get-go, or did you do, like, a basic flight training and then pick your aircraft?
Yeah, you do a couple different trainings, and then they select your aircraft after you fly. I flew the T6, so that's the longer
T-38.
training where you're, like, learning how to fly a plane. I actually wanted to go jets, but I feel very grateful that I got helicopters. So, it's always random, like, it doesn't just what they need to fill at that point in time, and I'm feel very grateful for helicopters because
Yeah.
jets are just in Lemoore or Virginia Beach. Lemoore, California, it's near Fresno. But helicopters, you have, like, the best duty stations, so, yeah.
You're like, "It worked out great." Yes, and Lemoore is near like, it's in the middle of nowhere. I grew up in Fresno, so I'm like, Lemoore is like
You did?
there's nothing out there. It's not like San Diego, and it's hot as heck.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
I have a lot of friends that live out there, yeah.
yeah, that's kinda funny. So, okay, and so when you got to San Diego for your first time at your flying helicopters, what was your job? What were you guys doing?
So then you go through another flight school. So then it's for the Romeos, it's about a year. So you do 2.5 years of flight school in Pensacola, or you go to like Corpus Christi and there's some other places, or like Meridian. Um, and then you go to the fleet, meaning like, okay, this is the actual like helicopter plane you're gonna fly for the Navy, and you go through that school. And so that school took about a year. It's called the FRS, the Fleet Replacement Squadron. And yeah, so then you're there just learning how to fly the Romeo or whatever helicopter and just having fun. So it was like a really good time. You're like, at that time, I mean, hell, probably like 24 years old, living in San Diego, learn how to fly a helicopter. That was my only job. And that's the only job you get during that time. The Marine Corps is a little different. At least they used to do this. I don't know if they still do, but like when you went to go learn how to fly your fleet helicopter, you had a ground job, so you were working like 2 times, 3 times harder than the Navy people who are just learning how to fly. So that was very interesting seeing my Marine Corps buddies going through that. So they had like really long
Yeah, because
days.
it's like they had 2 yeah, 2 jobs or,
Yeah.
like, they had to learn to fly, and then they had their ground job, and they're like you're like, "This is the greatest thing ever."
It's the greatest thing ever, and you just go to work when you needed to go fly, or if you had, like, a lesson or something like that, because they do, like, ground lessons, like, if you had but otherwise, you don't go to work. You just go there when you need to be there, which is very pilot. It's awesome. So, super great.
That's cool. That's
Yeah,
fun.
it's fun.
So you got to get acclimated to the area, do stuff around San Diego, probably hang out at the beach,
Yeah,
living the life.
living the life, yeah, and then I, selected my squadron, which ended up being in San Diego, which is super cool, and then right away pretty much went on deployment, so, um, but I
Your
had
life was over.
yeah, well, no, I honestly had just the best, fleet squadron experience. We had so much fun. I mean, we'd, out of 3 years, I was gone, it was like 440 days. But my brother was a submarine officer, and out of 3 years, he was gone like 700 days. So the whole time. So
Uh,
I had it way better than him, but yeah, we were gone a lot, but like it was just so much fun. We traveled the world. We went on 2 deployments and just a lot of going to Air Wing Fallon. That's really fun. That's where Top Gun is. That's near Lake Tahoe. And then just, some like underways in between then. But the deployments were really awesome.
And so for the deployments, did you go to like a specific region in the world, or were you like, what was your guys' overall mission while you were out there deployed?
Yeah, I've only gone on the deployments out to like near Korea and China. Seventh Fleet is what they call it. So those were the only deployments I went on, South China Sea, stuff like that. I went as a Romeo. You can go on like warships and the aircraft carrier. Sierras are just going to be like on the aircraft carrier, or I think they go on like supply ships as well. But so I did a deployment on a warship, a cruiser. So it's like a really little boat compared to the carrier, and then went to the carrier, which I found way more fun. So CrossFit classes, a Starbucks, it's like super fun. So
You're like, the little tiny ship had barely anything because it was really tiny, and then you went to and you're like, this is like a city on a
no,
on a
yeah,
boat, like on a ship.
yeah, it was like over halfway through deployment where they sent me over to the aircraft carrier, and I'm like, this is a dream. Oh my God. They have yoga and CrossFit. This is awesome. So I think the aircraft carrier is a really good time. The cruiser is fun too. It's a very, very small ship. So not as many fun things. You have to have a really good crew with you. So
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like when you're deployed, there's like when I was in Afghanistan, I was at a little tiny fob and we didn't really have very anything. And then you went to Bagram and they had like all this stuff and you're like, wow, this is
yeah,
tiny facilities that are always open. What's going on?
yeah.
So
Yeah, I know. Yeah, on
it
the
was,
cruiser, yeah, you only can eat at certain times of the day. And when you're flying, it's very hard. On the aircraft carrier, it's like you can eat anytime you want. And the food's way better. So
yeah. Yeah, it's a big difference, but that's the way it goes.
yeah.
What was the ratio of like you were? I mean, you're a female in the military, and then you're a female as a pilot. So were there a lot of other females, and did you face any challenges in that aspect of being in the Navy?
It's very interesting. Like right when I commissioned and went to flight school, it was like our class was just a lot of females, for the Navy at least, not the Marine Corps, unfortunately. Um, so going through flight school, there was a lot of us, and we have our whole group of friends, and we're still like really, really close, and see each other every year and do trips together and stuff. I'm actually going to see them next week in Virginia. But anyways, so that was awesome. And then in my squadron, specifically the Romeo squadron I was in, we had a lot of females, which was like super rare. So I even had a female department head. So it was awesome. Not everyone's experience, especially like my girlfriends who fly jets or flew jets. That's a little different. They had more of a rough experience. So, and the culture of the helicopter, since there are more females in it, it is way better than the jet culture when some of my girlfriends had some, unfortunate weird things happen with other males, but I've never had a bad experience. And the ships too, there actually is a lot of, it's mostly enlisted females, but like the aircraft carriers and the cruisers, they do have a lot of females on the ships as well nowadays. So it has been great. But I mean, if I didn't have that female department head for my first, she protected us a lot. If she wasn't there as a screen for some weird things that were going on, then it would be maybe a little different. So yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that you had someone who was like looking out for you and taking care of you and kind of was like, I'm gonna make sure that they're taken care of. And sometimes you can get, like the opposite of, depending even male or female, where you don't get that kind of like, let's protect these, little lieutenants. Well, I guess you guys are ensigns.
Yeah, well, we were
So
because you spent so much time through flight school, we were Lieutenant JGs
you
and
were lieutenants. Okay.
Lieutenant. Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but still young, like 25, 26 years old. So
Still really new to the military and getting that experience. But that's really cool to hear that it's changing and to see like how much of the culture is changing. And I think that's like it just goes to show like how women being part of a career field really changes it for the better for everyone, I feel like, and it just makes the military better, and so it's great to
Yeah.
hear that those things are changing.
I mean, honestly, if the military was run by women, it would seriously be so much better. I've had so many conversations with some of my girlfriends about this, especially because now I left as a lieutenant commander, um, and my friends are now lieutenant commanders. So we see behind the curtain, and we see some stuff how it's run, and it's still being run by men, but you always like the more senior women in the room, they honestly have the best ideas and they see the bigger picture. They're just able to critically think better. And we're like, oh my God, if these decisions were made by women, it would be so much better. So hopefully we get there as a military, because
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Yeah, I read the book, Invisible Woman by Catherine Perez, I think. I should know, I just wrote her name down. But it's such a good book because it talks about how there's a data gap between the data that's collected and how often the data isn't separated male and female. And it it even gives examples during World War II when they built the housing for to build the atomic bomb. They built that base in Los Alamos. They didn't build kitchens. I don't know if you've seen Oppenheimer. Like in that movie when she said there's no kitchen, like that's not made up. They really forgot kitchens, but it was all men in a room built like coming up with the construction plans, and they didn't think about it. And like it's not that like women are like, it's just that women think about different things, and so they bring up these great ideas, but it's just like, no, this is like common sense. But because men are so different than women, and that's if you have all of one group in a room making decisions, they're not going to see the other side. They're going to forget about common sense things that are common sense for different ethnicities, different genders, but aren't common sense for if you just have one group of people making decisions. So I
That's
think it's really important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so true. And it's so unfortunate because me and all my girlfriends, and my girlfriends are like incredible officers, incredible pilots. We all got out. And and a big reason is I don't want to just keep being because once you do get in rooms, behind the curtain, it is all men. And usually all men of the same race, unfortunately. And it's just like, I'm just tired of being the only one. And I'm just, they're going to have to be women that make this sacrifice, which there are now, but hopefully it doesn't take that long to get there. But yeah, the women, the, are the ones, the women in the higher positions are the ones worried and talking about the retention problem in the Navy. And I'm sure it must be the same in the other fields. I just, know the Navy and Marine Corps. And they're the ones talking about in the rooms, even on deployment. And the men are not really talking about it and don't really care. And it's just, and all of my friends and I, we got out. So I don't know anyone within my friend group who stayed in. So it's really unfortunate. It's just,
Yeah. I think the hard part about retention is that so many of the people who stay in, obviously, like they have a reason that they're staying in, and they either want to make a certain rank, or there's whatever the reason is. Well, that reason for them is like why, and now you have all these people who stayed in, or stayed in and made general, and they're like, why are people staying in? And they're not, and they're just this group that like was super dedicated to the military, never even thought about getting out, and they're like, they can't comprehend like why are people getting out of the military. And it's hard to understand, and you really have to talk to people, veterans who got out, and find out like, why did you get out, what can we do to change the military. And I think there's this like disconnect, like you're saying, between the people who stay in, who are like, well, it's always worked out in the past, and it's like, yeah, I don't think that's a good thing to rely on. We've always somehow had enough people. It's like, okay, that has happened, but the world is changing, and how can we make the military better? There's so many ways that we can. So, yeah.
yeah. And honestly, this is my opinion. And I think a lot of people feel this way too. but it's very different. Back when I was a young Lieutenant JG or lieutenant, my lieutenant commanders or my commanders, they were having a purpose and they had a mission. And they felt like involved, and then they had a purpose of being there. But we are very much in like a peacetime, and they are still treating the sailors and everyone like we're in wartime, and they're giving no rest. So, I mean, on the one carrier I was on, total peacetime, but these sailors never got a break. They did deployment, and then they went on another deployment. They went on another deployment. And, by the second deployment, half of them were divorced. And then by the third, so and they're all planning to get out, because it's like, why are you treating people like we're in wartime? And then they don't see the purpose. They don't see the mission either, because
Right.
I mean, the mission right now is deterrence, but to treat.
It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to get behind and get fired up
Yes.
about deterrence.
Exactly.
Even though it's like super important, but it's like, oh, September 11th happened, and like, that really did push the military, because we thought about that day, and that day like really meant to so many people when it happened. But now people who are joining the military weren't even alive when it happened, so it's like, that day doesn't mean anything, and they don't like, it doesn't mean the same thing. They might know it in a history book, but it's not the same. And then to try and like deter something, it's a lot harder to like, try and deter something that hasn't happened. It's like, yeah. And if you're not communicating all that stuff down to the junior enlisted and the junior officers, then they can get, like, why are we doing this? What is the purpose? Could it be done another way? And they feel dejected, and they're giving so much, like their marriages and all these things, not seeing their kids, and then they get out. So let's talk a little bit about why do you want to say something before I switch to you?
Oh, no, that's like a really excellent point. And there was actually a study done, like there was less problems in commands that the junior sailors knew the purpose and the mission. So there were less like, liberty incidences and stuff like that when they knew what they were there for, versus not communicating down, which is a huge problem. But anyways, yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, you have to get buy-in of the people below you, because then that gives them like a purpose and a mission. And yeah, I've seen that in like even volunteer positions, when the person in charge holds the information and the people below are like, wait, what's going on? Why are we doing all these things? And it can get really discouraging really fast. And then, at the military, it's a lot more intense than a volunteer position. So for sure, that makes a lot of sense. So you said you had a long commitment because you were, in the aviation career field. So when you were coming up on the end of your commitment, you were starting thinking, should I stay? Should I go? What was that decision process like? Or maybe you knew already, I'm getting out.
Well, yeah, I knew years and years before. There's a lot of reasons why I got out. It was very calculated though, but I will say, tying into what we were just last talking about, I mean, I've had a lot of friends and friends of friends and people I knew who have died in helicopter or other related crashes, jets, blah, blah, blah. It's like, why and it's always some reason, like maintenance related or something in that realm. Unfortunately, I mean, they just down the Ospreys for how long, and that was all like maintenance related. So that was really unfortunate. And so I'm like, do I want to keep putting my life on the line when I don't see, like, I'm not really, I just didn't want to do it anymore and keep putting my life on the line. And that was a big reason why I wanted to get out. And I saw that at the end of my tour. And I never came in as a lifer, really. I kind of just wanted to fly helicopters, travel the world, have a good time, and go off and do another thing in life and start a new chapter. That's always kind of, but I'm like, if I'm having, so much fun or whatever, like I'll consider like staying in. So I decided that, years before my commitment was until 2024. I got out December 31st, 2023. But so I think it was back in, so 2019 is when I left my fleet squadron, and that's like when I knew. So they wanted to send me to Texas to fly T6s and be an instructor. And so I was able to get orders for like a shore tour to stay in San Diego because I knew I wanted to get out, and I just always had like this entrepreneurial spirit. I've never just been able to like use it because I've just been so busy flying and doing that career path. I'm like, I just want to go on shore tour, not fly, just like do some side thing, figure out what I want to do with my life. And that's what I did. And it was amazing. I mean, COVID happened, but at least I was living in Pacific Beach during COVID right next to the ocean. So that was nice. And then I was able to get another tour in Coronado and didn't have to deploy for that. So then, but it was all very intentional. And I spent that first like year at my shore tour figuring out, writing down all of my options and figuring out exactly what I wanted to do. I had a million different directions I was thinking about going, and then ended up just naturally going into like the real estate realm. But before, I mean, I was thinking of so many different things and just doing the what if scenarios and having it all organized on a spreadsheet and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, but I love hearing about like your planning for the future because a lot of times people don't know what's coming next. One time I interviewed someone and she was like, "I was just so busy. I like never even thought." It was just like she just signed the papers even though like she had to deploy back to back and leave her like little baby behind and all these challenges that she faced, but she just kept signing the paper to stay in because she didn't even like think about the future. But I think that it's so important to like think about what you want and stop and being like, no, I'm ready to get out and I'm gonna use this last, tour to do, a short tour where you're not deploying and you have some more time and a little bit more flexibility. And then you made a list of like all the things you wanted to do, probably looked at pros and cons and then, started to discover where you wanted to go instead of just saying, ah, like 6 months out and I'm supposed to be getting out. I don't know what I'm gonna do. You planned years in advance so that you could figure out. I mean, 2019 to that's 5 years. That's so awesome that you were able to do that. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to bring you back was because you mentioned in the interview with VFF is that you like felt this calm like when you got out because you had built this foundation that you built over time. It's not something you can do in like 3 months. It took years of work. So I think that's really great.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard especially, it just depends on where the Navy puts you. I mean, if they said no, and then I had to do that tour in Corpus Christi and be a flight instructor, I mean, I don't know if I'd have the time to be able to try all these different things, especially in the middle of nowhere, Corpus Christi.
Right. In Texas.
So I got very lucky in that regards, and on my last tour as well. So it's very crazy how they do this to aviators. So your last tour is a sea tour as an aviator. So you get out like, it doesn't make any sense to me. The 10-year mark always falls during your disassociated sea tour, and it has to be a sea tour. I was able to my detailer was awesome, and he was able to find something that was like a sea tour, but I wasn't going to deploy, which I was like the only one on my friends who didn't deploy during my disassociated sea tour. Because you definitely do. You're going to be like on the aircraft carrier, like as a shooter, or, on the aircraft carrier doing like air ops there's all these different jobs. That's what they're usually going to put you in. But I was able to do something in Coronado and stay there and like build my foundation. So I did get very lucky in that regards, but even if I didn't, I think I still would have found the way to build that foundation because it was so important. I'm 33 now. I just got out. So I'm like pretty adult. So for the past, 10 years or even, in ROTC, because my college was paid for, and I did work during college to pay for like food and boarding and stuff like that. But I've always had a paycheck, so I was like extremely terrified. So I don't know if a lot of it was fear-based of having a plan. I've always had a plan in my life. So I think that's why I was just extremely scared of like not having an income. But also my goal since like 2019, because I have this entrepreneurial spirit, was to never write a resume and to never have a W-2 after the military. So here we are. I haven't written a resume and I don't have a W-2. I work for myself. So we'll see how it goes. But I hit my goal, at least for the first like 5 months of getting out in the military. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I love you talking about like goal setting and like having a focus. And then you were talking about like being lucky and like sometimes sometimes they give you like that tour that is really hard. It makes it hard to plan at the end. And sometimes you can get lucky. And I think if you know that you want to get out and you're able to like express that to the detailer, most detailers, not all, will try and work with you and try and help you find that situation. But if you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do, they're just going to send you. And I feel like it's so important to be able to articulate like what you want so that the military can work with you because so many people don't have a plan and they don't really know what they want. And so I think that my husband is getting closer and closer to retirement and they keep saying, well, don't you want to do this? And we're like, no, because then we might have to move. And like, we want to stay here. We're happy. We have a house. Like, we don't need our lives all rattled just so that the military could say, like, dangle this carrot in front of us. But we have that like focus on like where we're going. And so whenever things come up, we're like, yeah, no, that doesn't fit our plan. Or, oh, maybe we'll consider it. But we know what we want. And I think a lot of times people don't really know where they're going. And so it makes it really hard. So,
Yeah. And I had to, in the military, there's two different ways you can make decisions. You can make a decision based on the lifestyle you want or on the career you want. And sometimes they line up, but that is so, so rare that it's going to be the same decision. So, like, I always made decisions based off the lifestyle I want and like the future I wanted. So, does Corpus Christi going to be a flight instructor? Yes, that would be best for my career at the Navy career at the time. But is that going to get me my 10-year goal of being on the coast somewhere working for myself, not flying? I was like, no, if I want to be an airline pilot or if I want to stay in the Navy, I'm going to go to Corpus Christi and do that. But if I want to, live out of a van, like on the ocean, like being a nomad, no, I should stay in San Diego and take, the crappy short tour job that's going to like
right.
give me that opportunity. So I always made those decisions. And I always like, okay, if I choose here, what would my life look like in 5-10 years? And if I choose this, what would it, and that's how I made the decisions. So.
Yeah, that's such great wisdom, such great advice. I really wanted to focus on transition, so I'm really excited that you had such a great plan. You're like the perfect guest to be like, follow this example because it really is so important to like think about the future. And it's something that I didn't do enough of when I was in the military and getting out. And my husband's still in, so that's kind of been like my safety net of like not having to jump quite it the whole way because I didn't have to suffer and lose the benefits. But it is like so important that you plan for the future and that you know what you want, and I think that's really hard as a young person, but it's so important. So, is there anything from your time in the military or your transition out of the military that you wanted to discuss that we haven't talked about?
Um, I mean, I am so, so grateful for the military and I just had such a blast. And I mean, all my best friends are, people I met in the military or in college through ROTC. So, and it gave me like the grit and the flexibility and the wisdom and everything to like do really great in any career. Cause I feel like now I'm like, I can do anything. I can go to any career and I feel like and excel because, 10 years of being in the military and flying helicopters, doing a million different things, it gives you that. So it was so worth it. And just, yeah, the planning, like, I'm just so surprised how people, and the military doesn't teach you, all the military cares about is just getting their job done. They honestly, they don't, the people care about you. The military doesn't care about you, unfortunately, but the leaders do, good leaders do. So yeah, you have to like think about yourself because the military is always going to fill the position. It doesn't like they'll get that position filled. It's just a wheel, like what do they call it? It's a cog in the
A
wheel or whatever.
hamster. Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
feel it. And so you just have to do what's best for you and not think about anyone else when you're making those decisions because at the end of the day, like, it's your life, so
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad to hear you had such a great experience in the military, and I do have one last question, which you did almost touched on, but I think we can still get an answer. But I always like to end the interview with what advice would you give to a young woman who's considering joining the military?
mm. I would say go fly go fly helicopters or planes because it is seriously just the coolest, most amazing experience ever. Um, get your college paid for by the military and go have fun and then figure out what you wanna do with your life. I mean, the military is definitely different now, and I know they are changing, they are trying to change for younger generation, and they'll get there, but I would say, yeah, get a college degree, go be an officer, get your college paid for by them, and, like, you don't have to go fly, but, like, go do something fun. Go have fun and travel the world because having the Navy pay for you to travel the world is just incredible. My sister, I think she's like 24 or 25 now, and she hasn't been able to travel that much because she's not in the military, so she has to pay for it. I've been to, like, so many countries doing the coolest things, and the Navy paid for it, so it's awesome.
I love that advice. I like that you're like, "You don't have to fly, just follow your passion," but I mean, follow what you're passionate about, and there's so many things you can do in the military, and it just gives you a strong foundation for the rest of your life, and so thank you so much for being a guest, thank you for sharing your story, I really am glad that we got to do this interview.
Yay, thanks for having me.